Griffin the Gecko, and welcome to my channel if you are new here, and welcome back if you are one of my 17 friends that have been along for the ride thus far. Like I said, my name is Griffin. I normally post climbing content, but today I want to diverge just a little bit. So today I'm going to be going over Ted the Caver, which it was a story created back in 2001, I think. I read it a long time ago. That was before I got into rock climbing and before I got into spelunking. I'm really excited to read this. I haven't read it in a long time. So, just a brief synopsis from what I remember of the story is that this guy named Ted, who is a caver, go figure, right? It's his journal and his adventures going through what he calls the Mystery Cave. And he and one of his friends are exploring a cave and they find an opening that's like this big. It's barely big enough to like get a hand stuck through or get their camera stuck through, and they see that it opens up into a bigger cave. And there's a whole website that was built around this back in the day through Angelfire, which I hadn't heard of until I was looking through this. But alrighty, let's get into it. March 23rd, 2001. Due to the overwhelming number of requests I've received to tell about my discoveries and bizarre experiences in a cave not far from my home, I have created this webpage. I will outline the events that happened to me during the past few months, beginning with my journey into a familiar cave December 2000 and ending, well, it hasn't actually ended yet. I will use my caving journal as the text to tell about my recent experience. I will give them to you as I experience them in chronological order. I have included photographs that were taken during my many trips into the cave. I have also created a few illustrations to help the reader get a better idea of what things look like in the cave. All of the photos were taken by me, or one of the few people I went into the cave with. I want to point out a few things before I tell about the events. Number 1. Most of the pictures were taken with a Kodak disposable type camera. I took a better camera into the cave on one or two of the trips. Pictures on this site are all original photos and have not been messed with or enhanced, other than where noted. As a rule, I get my pictures put onto a disc at the time of developing so I don't have to scan them later. This ensures the best digital quality. Number 2. I will not reveal the names of the other people involved in this experience. If you know me well enough, you probably know them already. Number 3. I will not reveal the location of the cave to anyone for any reason, so please don't ask. I refuse to be held accountable for anyone's life but my own. I will refer to the cave as Mystery Cave. That is not its real name. If you think these events sound far-fetched, I agree. I would come to the same conclusion had I not experienced them. I will finish this site as soon as possible. Check the date on the main page to see when I've made updates. To protect myself from people who might want to copy this site, I include the following. All text on this and following pages are my own words and copyright 2001 from Ted. That's the front page. This definitely starts out a lot differently than I remember. I don't remember this part. I remember just getting thrown right in, but I'm ready to go. There's a button that says the discovery, so I'm going to click it. It's been clicked. Oh, there's colors. I will divide the text into two colors for the sake of clarity. The gray is taken directly from my caving journal. The italicized blue text is my comment as I reflect on the experience. I will do my best to convey the thoughts and feelings I had during the entire event. I will not use actual names of the other individuals involved. I will include the entire relevant text of my journal. In an effort to present this experience in accurate light as possible, I will type my journal as I wrote it, sans grammar check. Please overlook my errors. Any additional comments will help to clarify things I wrote in my journal. Now, we're getting into the actual journal. Caving Journal, December 30th, 2000. B and I decided to get in one more caving trip before the new year, so we set our sights on Mystery Cave. Not a spectacular cave, but since neither of us had been caving in a while, it'd be nice to go to any cave. There was a bit of excitement to this trip. There was a small passage in the lower portion of the cave that I wanted to check out to see if it was possible to get past it. It had a small opening, but lots of air blowing out of it. Even though it's way too small to climb through, I had never even checked to see what was inside the passage. We got our gear loaded up and ready to hit the road by 3 p.m. We got to the cave in great time, since B likes to drive fast. We anchored from the usual tree and began to rappel into the cave. I went down first and got my gear together while B came down. I will refer to B many times. We've been caving together for many months now. He was injured in a caving accident a few years ago and was told he'd never walk again. Through hard work and perseverance, he not only walks but can get around very well in caves. The trickier parts of a cave might slow him down a bit, but he can make it. He patiently works through an obstacle until he gets past it. As for the reference to the small opening in the cave, there's a saying among cavers, if it blows, it goes, meaning if a passage has a good flow of air, it's probably worth investigating. After we explored all of the usual passages, we climbed down to check out the hole. The hole is located deep in the cave, near the lowest part of the cave. It's on the side of a cave wall about 3 feet from the floor. To look inside the hole, I had to kneel down to duck under an overhang of rock. I used my backup mini-mag light and held it inside the hole to see what I could see. I was excited by what I saw. The wall around the hole was 3 to 5 inches thick. It led into a tight passage. The passage opened up just a bit inside the hole. It continued back about 10 to 12 feet in a small crawl space. After that, it seemed to really open up. Although how much, we couldn't tell. But this could be a virgin passage. Obviously, no one had passed through this route, but there could be a way to the passage from the other side. To even get to the crawl space, we would have to enlarge the opening. Currently, it's about the size of my fist. Once we got past the opening, we would have a tight crawl back to where it opened up. It would take some work, but we thought we could do it. We sat down for a few minutes to rest and contemplate our plan of attack. While we sat there in darkness, we could hear the wind howling from the other side of the passage. It was a low, eerie noise. We could also hear a low rumble from time to time. No big deal, though. The cave is in the vicinity of a highway that had heavy trucks drive on it. We figured the rumble was the effect of the trucks resonating through the rocks. We determined that our best plan would be to haul a cordless drill into the cave to drill into the rock. Then we could take a bullpen and a small sledgehammer and break up the rock. It seemed pretty straightforward. We would widen the hole big enough to squeeze in and see what was on the other side. The efforts to haul out the equipment down to the hole would be a pain, but we hoped it would be worth it. I named the passage Floyd's Tomb after Floyd Collins. It seemed to look like a tight spot where Floyd spent his last miserable days on Earth. Floyd Collins was a caver back in the early 1900s. He got stuck in a crawl space and was unable to free himself. It's an amazing story that's detailed in a book called Trapped, the story of Floyd Collins. I think that was the title, I don't recall the author. Calling our passage Floyd's Tomb was not only a tribute to Floyd, but a commentary of the size of the passage. Haha. In retrospect, it's funny how simple I thought it was going to be. I figured a few hours work and we'd be in. Had I known how long it was going to take, I doubt I would have even begun the project. Had I known what I was going to experience in the cave, I never would have returned. We gathered up our gear and headed for the surface. Normally, I couldn't care less if I ever came back to this cave. There's nothing special about it. But now I was psyched about getting back and getting through. We hadn't even left the cave and we were planning our return trip. The rest of the journal entry talked about the climb out of the cave, our dinner, and our trip back home. Comments as of now on this? Just some theories. I can't remember what's in the hole deep in my soul. I want to think like there's some creature, there's some monster in there, or maybe it'll just take a turn like Floyd Collins or any of the other cavers that got stuck. Wondering if it's going to be a situation like they get into this tiny crawl space, and then suddenly they don't feel the wind anymore, and their exit got caved in, and they're stuck there forever. That's terrifying. That's scarier to me than falling. I've climbed outside once so far, and it was probably like 70 feet that I went up, 70 feet to the top, and I looked down, and it was scary. It was wild, but I would much rather fall off of that cliff than get a cave, like, falling on top of me. I do love a good cave. I love a good cave crawl. The same day that I climbed outside, actually, we went to a cave called the Ice Cave, and we went through it, and I had my phone with me, and I was recording with my flashlight on just so I can, like, not only see what's in front of me in this cave, but also just, like, look back and see it's like, wow, I was in a really tight space, because I was, like, army crawling through the mud with my phone in one hand, and all of a sudden my phone goes dark, and you can hear me say, oh, shit. Oh, shit. What? My phone died. And I continued. I'm insane, apparently, because, not only did I not, like, turn around and go back, I kept going deeper until I literally couldn't move anymore. I had a hell of a time getting myself turned around in the dark, and crawled back out. There were other people with me, thankfully, so I was following voices, basically. And it was really cool. It was adrenaline that made me do that. I don't think I would have done that, but I did anyway. Alright, so the next page is called Work Begins. January 27th to 28th, 2001. B and I were both excited to get back in the cave and get to work. I figured with about 4 hours work, we could be in and see what was on the other side. We had arranged to borrow a DeWalt cordless drill to bring with us. We also had masonry bits to drill with, sledgehammers too, to break up the rock, bull pins to insert into the drill holes, and a few other tools that we ended up not using. Getting the tools down to the work site provided to be a challenge. One of us would climb down the rope and stop at a ledge or a good resting place, and the other would lower the tools. We keep repeating this routine until we got to the bottom of the cave. Then we had to drag the tools out to the hole. It took about an hour to finally get to work. This is my cat, Sirloin. To begin work, we had to get down on our knees and do our best to avoid smacking our heads on the ceiling. Working in this awkward position, we would drill into the wall around the hole. That was the hard part. We really had to push on the drill, and it was a slow progress. Then we inserted the bull pin into the hole and hammered on it until the rock broke up. Then we'd repeat the process. To give you an idea of how slow it went, the typical size of the rock would break off was about fingernail size. If we broke off a large piece, about a third of the size of my palm, it was cause for celebration. From the time for variety, we would just wail on a cold chisel with a 5-pound sledge. It was very slow progress. The problem with the sledge was that we couldn't take a good swing because of the tight quarters. Even though we spent many hours and several trips working on the hole, we never did find a better technique for widening it. The drill, bullpen, hammer got the best results for our efforts. We came up with some crazy ideas for breaking up the rock. Everything from TNT, which was never seriously considered, to hauling a generator to the mouth of the cave and running an extension cord down to a jackhammer. We even thought about using liquid nitrogen to freeze the rock and make it more brittle. After a couple hours of hard work, we realized what our limiting factor was going to be. It was about then that our first battery met an abrupt death. We had a second battery, so we swapped them out. The second battery lasted a little longer because we hammered and chiseled a little more often and a little longer each time. Finally, after about 3 more hours of drudgery, the second battery died and we called it a night. Whew! We could tell that we had done some work in the cave, but it was not much. For the first time since we got in the cave, we sat back, both of us took a break. It was nice to check out the results of our hard work. Then we noticed the howling again. It seemed to be a little louder than the last time we were there. We just figured the wind was blowing a little stronger outside. What we could not figure out was the rumbling. It, too, seemed to be louder and more frequent. This time we could not attribute the noise to trucks. The road that the trucks drove on was not very busy to begin with. At that time of night it should be dead. Yet the rumbling continued. It seemed to be coming from deep within the passage. B said he would ask some veteran cavers what would be causing the noise. We didn't spend a long time admiring our work. We still had to haul the gear up and out of the cave. Actually, we left some of it in the cave. It was still difficult work. What made it worse is that we were both exhausted. Our original plan was to be done with this cave and hit a couple other caves in the area the next day. Instead, we decided to crash at a nearby motel, charge up the batteries, and go back to the mystery cave. And then, ooh, this picture of the new hole, the update hole, I like that. I love that there's pictures, by the way. My journal goes on at length about the night after we left the cave. We got a room, dinner was excellent, I didn't sleep good despite the fact that I was exhausted, etc. We both slept in, so we got a late start back in the cave. The second day working on the cave went about the same as the first. We worked until both batteries were dead again. We were still not even close to getting through. The howling and rumbling continued as the day before. I don't have any theories about the howling and rumbling. I don't remember that, really. I remember them hearing air coming through it, but that howling, that's so eerie. Because for it to be howling, that's like a lot of wind. That's a lot of air. So there almost has to be another exit to this hole. But they don't see anything, and they don't hear anything. Except for, the rumbling. Next part is called On Caving. Before I continue with the next journal entry, I thought it might be helpful to the reader to explain a little bit about caving and about the atmosphere in the cave. As I reread and think about my description of the cave, I notice much of the language I use in my caving journal and the descriptions, or lack thereof, assume that the reader has a knowledge of caving and what it's like inside of a cave. In other words, I write my journals for me. I will take this time to give out more detailed description of the cave. I will tell about what it was like while we worked on the cave, and I will summarize our feelings up to this point. The cave was discovered several decades ago when construction in the area unearthed its entrance. From that time to the present, it's been visited mostly by locals in the area and avid cavers in the region. Beer cans can be found intermittently in the cave, mostly in the upper half. When the cave was first entered, it was probably beautiful. Dust, graffiti, vandals, pigeons, and regular use have diminished its appeal. There are still places in the cave where small formations remain undisturbed, as a reminder of what the rest of the cave used to look like. To enter the cave, one must have a good length of rope in order to rappel down the rock. A nearby tree serves as a good anchor point. Once the rope is tied to the tree about 20 feet away from a small cliff, it can be tossed over the edge of the cliff to a small ledge 15 feet below. Cavers then descend a short distance to the entrance. Once inside the cave, artificial light must be used. My light source of choice is a battery-operated helmet-mounted light known as a TAG light. Safe caving calls for at least 2 sources of backup lighting. For my backup lighting, I have a mini-mag light mounted to my helmet and another helmet-mounted light in my pack, which I always carry with me. I also have glow sticks that I carry. These are not considered good source of backup light by some, but they are good to use for taking lunch breaks, and they could be used to get out of a cave if other sources fail. After a short climb over rocks, the caver comes to a large pit. The same rope is used to reach the bottom of that one. The drop is only 50 feet or so, but it's not free hanging. In other words, you can't slide straight down the rope, which is preferable. You have to snake your way around sharp rocks as you descend. The ascent is made more difficult for the same reason. The pit varies in diameter from about 10 feet to 3 or 4 inches in a few places. The walls are lined with sharp, white rock called popcorn. Let me correct that. It used to be white, but now it's covered with dust and dirt that was kicked down above from years of caving. The popcorn makes it painful to brush against the sides of the pit. My choice of clothing is Levi's, t-shirt, gloves, and knee pads. I usually leave the cave with a few scrapes, but I'm at least comfortable while I climb around inside. The temperature is stable year-round. It feels cool in the summer and warm in the winter. We have gone on freezing days, and 10 feet into the cave it's warm enough that coats are not needed. It's a good temperature to work in, as we learned. For this size drop, I usually use a figure-8 descending device. For the climb up, I attach myself to the rope using a Petzl ascender, but I climb up on my own without using the device. It's there merely as a safety attachment in case I slip. Other cavers have their own methods of getting up and down. At the bottom of the drop, the caver gets to do some crawling for a while. There's a small room, about 6 by 6 feet, at the bottom that gives the caver a spot to leave his harness and ascending gear. Since there is no more steep drops, the harness is not needed and will only get in the way. Once the caver gets down to the 6 by 6 room, he can take a break under a ledge while the rest of the party comes down. Then, he must drop to his knees to negotiate a 10-foot long passage that's only a few feet high. This is where the knee pads come in handy. The floor is covered with a soft dirt, intermingled with bits of broken rock from above. The thin layer of dirt does nothing to soften the blow to the hands and knees as the caver works down to the crawl space. As a reward, at the end of the crawl, he gets to drop to his belly and scoot under a tight squeeze. Not really tight, just something low enough to make the caver scoot along the dirt. Once the caver gets on the other side of the squeeze, there are a few feet of crawl space, and then the cave opens up to stand. For most of the rest of the cave, the caver can stand, or at least stoop. The cave splits off into several passages at this point. 2 routes wind around rocks and crevices come to an abrupt dead ends. The other 2 lead to small pools of water. Each route is very fun to explore. They all lead for 100 feet or so in a gradual downward slope. Most of the time, the caver can walk upright in the passages. Other times, he will have to climb over large boulders or occasionally crawl on hands and knees. Water is a common occurrence in caves. I've been told that one of the local residents was one of the first people in the cave, and his cousin dove into the pools using scuba gear. He says the cave continued down for a couple 100 feet underwater. What they were hoping for, and what happens frequently, is that the passage comes up somewhere else with the virgin cave patches to its floor. Unfortunately, I don't possess the knowledge to give more detail about the types of rock in the cave. When we were drilling, we would have some parts that were easier to drill than others, and there were different colors in the rock, refer to the photos taken in the cave, but that's the best I can do to describe the makeup of the cave. At the point the cave splits into 4 routes, 2 passages that are dead end are to the immediate left of the caver. Straight ahead and to the right are the passages that lead to pools of water. The entrance to the passage on the right is the largest of the 4. The arched opening rises nearly 10 feet in the air, ending a mere foot below the cave ceiling. As the caver enters the passage, the ceiling gradually lowers until it's about 6 feet high. It continues at the same height for the 40 feet that the passage travels in a continuous direction. This section of cave resembles a hard rock mine. It's an arch nearly perfect and the floor flat and easy to walk on. It's easy to picture rusty mine cars on rail lines and dust-covered miners with blistered hands gripping dull picks. The pseudo-mine comes to an end, and the caver is once again forced to drop onto hands and knees and get reacquainted with the floor of the cave. This time, the crawl lasts about 20 feet. The floor is sloping gently downward for the first half of the crawl, then it gets fairly steep and slippery. Able-bodied cavers can still climb carefully down the slippery slope. When I go with B, I carry the end of the rope that we used to get down to this point. I usually need to tie another short length of rope to the first rope to make sure he can use it to reach the bottom. The crawl lasts a few feet beyond the bottom of the slide. Over the next 10 to 12 feet, the caver slowly begins to regain the standing position. After walking a few feet and climbing down a short drop-off, the caver arrives at a small level area which has a passage leading down immediately to the left. The passage ends 75 feet later in one of the small bodies of water. To the right is the rock wall. Straight ahead is an indentation in the wall which goes back another 3 feet. On the wall at the rear of the indent is a small hole about the size of a softball. To get near the hole, the caver ducks into an overhang and kneels upon the rock that rise above the floor by a few inches. By the time the caver reaches this point, he's either warm or sweating, and the first thing he notices is the cool breeze blowing out of the hole. It was my recognition of this hole as a potential doorway to unexplored portions of the cave that ultimately led to the telling of my experience. As been tradition for all the years I've been caving, the party reaches the point in the cave, usually at the deepest part of the cave, that all the lights are extinguished. Complete blackness fills the eye. For a moment, the individual caver strains the eye muscles, focusing in and out with the expectation of catching a crumb of light somewhere in the false night. After several futile moments, the caver turns his head at a sound, perhaps another caver, only to have the other senses return and then heighten. The sounds, smells, feelings that have been overlooked to this point come racing back to the caver in perfect detail. The pain of their own behind sitting on the cave floor, the smell of dust, sweat, guano, the sound of modern material shifting on age-old rock as the cavers attempt to find comfort in a solid foundation. At the back of every caver's mind at this time is what if? What if a person had to climb out of the cave with no light? Would he make it? Would he find all the turns and bends which got him to this place? If not, would a rescue party find him in there? The depth of darkness recognized at this time is something that is rarely experienced outside a cave. Many first-time cavers erroneously declare that they have to hold their hand within 2 or 3 inches of their face before they can see it. The truth is the human eye is incapable of seeing an absence of light. If they did not hear something coming toward them, they would feel it before they saw it. Complete and total dark. This exercise is a great way to remind people to take backup lighting. As we proceed to work in the cave, we developed a system pretty early and little changed in succeeding trips. The first time in the cave, B took a first shift at tripping away at the opening. After about a half hour, he needed a break, so I took over. He told me what worked best, and I continued doing the same. We would try new things from time to time to use new muscles, but usually stuck to the same method. We would use the masonry bit and press on the drill as hard as we could and drill out a hole in the rock. Safety glasses and dust masks were worn while working. Then we would insert the bullpen and hammer it into the rock and break out small chunks of the cave. Then we would drill another hole and repeat the process. Occasionally, the drill would hit a soft spot in the rock and that step would be shortened. We'd work until we became too tired to continue, then B and I would trade. While one of us was working, the other would remain in the darkness and either eat or drink, or just lay down on the cave floor, padded by rope bags. After just a few rotations, we were tired enough to catch a nap while taking our break. The only light we used was the helmet light on the head of the worker. Since it was pointing toward the hole, the resting person was left mostly in the dark. This was a welcome benefit, since the resting person was usually, resting. The rest break was also a chance to cool down a bit, which didn't take the cooler temperature of the cave. Fortunately, the temperature of the cave allowed us to work pretty hard and not overheat too much. I remember that I frequently looked at the hole and thought, hey, it's big enough, I think I can squeeze through, only to be disappointed in my attempt. However, even after the first attempt and failure, I knew I would keep working on the hole until I got through. This, despite the fact that I knew it would take many more hours of hard work. It actually became an obsession with me. I tried to get out to the cave and work as often as I could. I hoped that the passage led to a larger, undiscovered cave that we would be the first ones to enter. I guess the explorer in me wanted to find a new frontier there in the cave. Since B is such an avid caver, he was motivated by the same desire to find a new, unexplored cave. What we did find was not at all what I expected. Okay, quick comment. I really like this part. This feels like it should be super boring to me, but I'm visualizing. I can see what he's describing. I feel that he did do a very good job with, or the author anyway, did a very good job with the descriptions. The next part is called Work Continues. February 10th, 2001. Scarcely 2 weeks had gone by, and already we were on our way back to work in the cave. We admit we had become obsessed with the idea of getting through the passage. That may be a sign of how exciting our lives really are. It's not that we think there's going to be something great beyond the passage. We just like the idea of being the first humans on the face of the planet to set foot in a virgin part of the cave. Although, if we found a hidden treasure, that would be fine with us. At a late start, drove part of the way into the dark. When I tell people that I go caving at night, they wonder why. They don't stop to think about it's always night once you're inside the cave. All the way out to Mystery Cave, we talked about new ideas to speed up our work. B also told me he talked to some caver friends of his that came up with an explanation about the rumbling noise. They thought it might be the sound of water deep within the cave, possibly a waterfall. They couldn't really explain why the noise seemed to come and go. To me, it's just one more reason to go through, so we can solve the mystery. This trip, we took B's dog, Whip. She's a Jack Russell Terrier. I was not at all concerned about taking the dog into the cave. We had taken her before. She answers the call of nature before we go in, then waits until we get out again. She's also well behaved inside the cave. We simply have to lower her via a custom-made harness until she reached the bottom of the main drop. Then she negotiated the rest on her own. She loves to explore, but won't go out of her sight. She doesn't have a light attached to her, so she has to wait for us. Another reason I didn't mind bringing Whip along with us was because we planned on putting her into the small hole and see how far into the passage she would go. That might give us an idea of what was on the other side. We knew that if there was a drop-off we couldn't see, the dog would turn around and come right back. We thought we might have to do some work on the hole before even going through the cave. Sweet little dog. I love dogs. I love Jack Russell Terriers. But, excuse me? We planned on putting her into the small hole and see how far into the passage it would go? We knew if there was a drop-off. When I read that just a second ago, my first thought was, yeah, if there's a drop-off, we're going to hear the dog hit the ground on the other side. Like, what? Excuse me? Anyways, don't bring a dog into a cave. What is this? Despite working in the dark of the night, we were able to rig up and get down pretty quickly. We didn't take as many tools as last time. Plus, we left some in the hole so we wouldn't have to haul them out and back in again. I did manage to get 2 more batteries for the drill for a total of 4. Also, a few more masonry drill bits. Even with the dog, we made good time getting down. Then something bizarre happened I can't quite explain. The dog began exploring as soon as we let her off the rope. She was in hog heaven, sniffing and darting around our feet. She would run from one person to the other as we made our way back to the worksite. At the point the cave splits into 4 packages, the dog seemed to run out of juice. She either just stuck right by either B or me. That was kind of odd. As we progressed further into the cave, she would only stay by B. She seemed edgy, like she saw something she didn't like. As we approached the short drop-off before the hole, she stopped and would only come further after we coaxed her. The hair on her back stood on edge. Finally, as we got within 20 feet of the hole, she began to whimper and hide behind B. Her tail was between her legs, and she was cowering down on the ground. Strange. I've seen her square off with dogs twice her size, but now she acted as if Satan himself was lurking in the darkness. I figured they must have been animals that used the cave as a home, and Whip smelled their scent. Too bad it upset her, because there was no way she was going to the passage. Thank you. We decided that with this new development, the nervous dog, one of us would work while the other stayed with the dog a few feet away from where we normally rested. We got right back into our routine of drilling, hammering, etc. With our extra supply of batteries, we were able to really push hard on the drill and not have to worry about using the batteries. This did not make our work any easier, but it did speed things up a little bit. Progress was still slow. I really didn't mind, though. My journal goes on for a while about the progress we were making. The entire time we worked, Whip did not move. She just laid there on a rope bag shivering. She would whimper from time to time. One thing I did not think about at the time was that she would not take her eyes off the hole. We should have been more observant of this intuitive animal. Dude, dogs know things. Dogs see ghosts. There's totally a ghost in that cave. There's a demon in this cave. There's a cave demon. There's gotta be. Have y'all seen the movie The Descent? When I watched it for the first time, I was like, I'm never going into a cave again. But I went into a cave a couple weeks ago. So, I lied to myself. Anyways, we were on our 4th battery when the second bizarre thing happened to us. B was working. He had just finished drilling a hole and was getting ready to hammer the bullpen when he stopped working and looked into the hole. I was kicking back, almost asleep, and hardly paying attention to him. He had a light on his side to illuminate the work area. I could see in the eerie glow a puzzled and intense look on his face. He looked over at me and shook his head. I asked him what was up. He said that he swore he just heard a strange noise emanating from the hole. He said it sounded like rock sliding on rock, sort of a grinding sound. I assumed his ears were just ringing from the drill. He didn't wear any earplugs this time. He assured me he heard what he said he heard. I didn't have an explanation, so I went back to dozing. B sat in the quiet of the cave for a long time before he resumed work. Also, he would stop from time to time and just listen. B is very grounded and not one to pursue some imaginary sound. I believe he heard something, but I'm not too concerned about what it was. I assume we will figure it all out once we get through the passage. The final battery lasted another hour or so. We were sitting around talking about our progress when I decided to see if I could get my head through the hole. My head easily fit, but there was no way my shoulders were going in. Oh, I can just imagine. Oh, sorry, excuse me. As I was kneeling there contemplating how close we were, I noticed something the bee overlooked. The wind had stopped. Ew. In all of the times I've been in the cave, I've always felt the wind blowing. The last time we were out working in the cave, the wind was blowing worse than ever. Even earlier, we remember the breeze cooling us off, but now, nothing. B said he did not know when it stopped. The rumbling had ceased too. Bizarre. This plain old cave was becoming mysterious. We talked for a long time in the dark of the cave. We debated what could possibly be causing these unusual events to occur. I think part of the reason we were sitting in the dark was because we were both too hammered to move. We could come up with no reasonable explanation for the strange things happening in this cave. After sitting for at least half hour, we slowly loaded up our gear and started for the surface. Whip couldn't have been happier to get out of there. Once again, we left some of our tools in the cave. We just put them in the hole. Not enough people used the cave to worry. Plus, we were too tired to care. We made a lot of progress this trip. It helps to have extra batteries. We still have a long way to go, but it sure is nice to see how far we've come. Click to see our progress on the hole. The hole is getting bigger. This is another one of my favorite parts about this, is the pictures that go through. The progression pictures. It makes it feel so real, and it, scares me a little more. Because creepypasta wasn't a thing. You gotta remember, creepypastas weren't a thing when this was written. This is like the OG scary story on the internet. The rest of the journal entry talked about climbing out of the cave, getting a room in a motel, and crashing. We were beat. In retrospect, I can't believe how casual we were about everything that was happening in the cave. At the time, the only thing we could think about was getting into the passage. Everything else was a minor distraction. I do recall thinking that it would be nice to get in and see how the mechanics of the cave worked, where the wind was coming from, and what was making the noise, etc. Now, weeks later, I think of my ignorance and naivety and shiver. Here feels like a good stopping point. The next part is called noises, so we're getting into like the spooky part of it. The estimated reading time for this, according to creepypasta.com. Okay, now how do I end this? How do I end videos? I don't know. Like I said, I'm still new at this. I'm having a great time doing it though. I love having somewhere to post videos of me climbing, and I have a dorky little headset that I wear for POV climbs sometimes. I guess the best way to end these videos is just by saying thanks for watching. I will catch you in part 2. I'm really excited to continue reading Ted the Caver. I'm having a great time so far. Hope you all have an awesome rest of your day, or awesome rest of your night. If it's nighttime wherever you are, I hope you sleep well. I will see you in a couple of days to keep exploring the Mystery Cave. Alright, bye!